Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of The Field Between. My name is Ahmed.
I'm Yasmin.
All right, what do we got on the docket today?
How are we doing, Ahmed?
We're doing updates. Okay, we're good. I spoke at a rally yesterday. Really
got good feedback, right?
I don't know if it was good. I mean, I really upset one guy in particular who became rabid at the thought that students who were demanding an end to the genocide were not terrorists.
So kind of a Zionist, to put
I
it
would say
mildly.
kind of, yeah. I would
Yeah.
say, I mean, he was like trying to fight his way through the crowd toward me and then kind of stalked the rally after, so.
Makes me nervous. I'm proud of you for speaking and, you know, getting more and more public speaking experience, but it just makes me nervous just because people can be so crazy. Yeah.
He seemed pretty crazy.
Great.
What else? I will talk about this, I guess, in a bit, but it's Muharram, and today is Ashura. We're recording this on Sunday, the 6th. Today's 6th or 7th?
The 6th, yeah. We went to a majlis yesterday, which we'll talk about in a little bit. In a bit. Yeah. Yeah, but that was really nice.
And that's it.
We celebrated Anthrocon.
Oh,
As our
yeah.
listeners are all aware, we live downtown, and this is now our third Anthrocon that we've witnessed, second while we've been downtown. Mm-hmm. And I think we learn more every year.
We do learn more every year.
Yeah.
And it's like bigger this year, too. It's crazy. Actually,
I think we've just been out and about a lot, too, so we've really been in it.
it wasn't just Anthrocon, but it was also the World Mustache and Beard Championships.
We
Right
saw
down the
some
street.
incredible beards. They were crazy.
We were fortunate enough to meet the number one cheek beard grower
In the world.
in the world.
And this is like his
from
third
Germany.
time ranking. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. His
It
daughter was
cool.
real sweet.
His daughter was sweet. At first, we were concerned that his daughter may be his girlfriend that he met. You know, he was like a much older guy and then like a much younger woman, but glad it was his daughter.
Yeah. She was just a nice woman, not someone who was chasing that cheek
The
clout,
sweet,
you know.
sweet cheek beard.
Yeah.
Or cheek mustache.
It was like probably like at least 6 inches on either side. It was very impressive.
Oh, more than that. It was like really full and then just like curled out
It
into
does
like
curl
a
out, yeah.
spiral. I asked her because they were German and he didn't speak English, but I asked her and she was kind of translating how long it took, and she said 3 years to grow that out.
No. What are you talking about? She said 30 years.
No.
Not 3. Yeah, she said he's been growing this my whole life and I'm 28 or something. It's been like 30 years.
Wow.
Yeah, 3
That's
years.
even
Wow, you
more
just really
impressive.
diminished that man's life accomplishment.
Well, I guess my question is like, has he been growing it to what it is now for 30 years, or has he just been doing this for 30 years? You know what I'm saying?
My guess is that like if it's similar to like hair on your head, he probably only lightly trims it so it can continue to keep on growing. Like probably for 30 years he hasn't like totally shaved his face, you know.
Yeah.
I wonder if he's still married and how she feels about his face.
Oh, yeah. What are your thoughts if I got really into my facial hair?
Like that,
Yeah.
I would really not be a fan. Yeah.
Really? Do you think it would affect the marriage?
I feel
How
like
solid is our marriage?
I feel like attraction is important and bodies change with time, but like knowing that you were choosing this, I mean, it's a fine line. I think.
Wow.
I think
Okay. Women get to ask the question, would you love me if I weighed 150 more pounds? Would you love me if I weighed 40 billion pounds, or if I turned into a worm, or if I was a lizard, or if I was like a big pile of slime?
I'm not saying-
And then you're like, I think that would be weird to be in love with a big pile of slime. And then they're like, oh my God, he doesn't even love me.
I'm not saying I wouldn't love you. I'm just
Suddenly
saying
a man wants to grow a mustache.
I'm not saying I wouldn't love you. I'm just saying I'm not sure if I'd be as attracted to you. And attraction is important, you know?
That's if this were going the other way around, that's the wrong answer.
But I'm not interested in like really intense bodily modification.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it's my body. Like, I do believe it's your body and it's your choice. I'm just saying I wouldn't be super hype about it.
Okay.
Yeah. But I would support you. You're not hurting
It
anyone
doesn't
else.
sound like it. It actually does not sound like it.
It's
But
like,
okay.
how do you kiss someone? There's so much hair in the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. It seems logistically difficult, you know?
It did look pretty difficult.
Yeah.
Also, I think about he was going to get 5 guys.
Yeah.
You know?
I was thinking about that
How
too.
do you like get the crumbs and stuff out?
I mean, I guess it's easier than a beard, right? Because it's kind of like all upward. So you just have to like go from the bottom.
Yeah, he probably has some sort of eating strategy. Like,
Yeah.
cut everything up into tiny bits.
Yeah.
All right. What else?
I think those are all my updates.
Those are all your updates.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are we talking about today?
Muharram.
Oh, wait. We
Do you have another update? We saw the fireworks for July 4th. We didn't really partake in July 4th festivities. We just enjoyed watching the furries watch the fireworks with our friends.
Oh yeah, we should talk about FurryCon a little bit more in detail.
Okay, yeah.
They were cute.
They were.
And
We've also identified that they're very cartoonish. They're not like realistic, which is interesting. I feel like there could be
Well,
a
I've
separate
always
market
known
for
that.
that. I don't think I really realized that until I saw thousands of them at one time. Like they're all like cartoons. Like none of them look like, you know.
They're all kind of like fantasy Lisa Frank style.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think I have a feeling this probably all evolved from the same online community that was like producing some sort of art that
I'm sure
created
it's more
these
than one,
animals.
but yeah.
But I think if you go back to the original message boards where it started,
You think there's like one message board where it all
I think
went
there's
down?
a genesis. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Or, you know, some deviant art account or something like that.
Oh, throwback.
I'm trying to think. It's always interesting watching them interact with the rest of the city.
The city is so welcoming. It's really cute.
Yeah. I watched one get yelled at though because he was like jaywalking and the car was trying to turn and just like some guy like honked at him and then rolled down his window and he's like, "Don't cross the fucking street." And he like yelled at the furry. It was kind of sad.
But at least it wasn't like furry based hate. It just sounds because he was like in the guy's way, you know?
But because he was just kind of like a scrawny little furry guy and he I don't know, it was almost like watching like a squirrel get run over because he just, you know, he like ran out there and then got kind of confused at the situation and then just kind of started to double back and you know how squirrels
Maybe he
do
was
that
in
zigzag
character.
thing?
Yeah.
It's possible.
Yeah.
Possible he was in character.
My favorite furry I've seen is the moth. Moth looks really cool. There's too
ones
many
with the
cats and
wings.
dogs. That's just like
the
you get
ones with
tired
the
of them.
wings are cool. I mean, they're mostly kind of like almost foxes.
Yeah, it's a lot of foxes. I saw 1 or 2 fish. Those were cool.
I saw one. I took a picture of my favorite one. Maybe I'll make that the show art.
Yeah, sounds nice.
We have a pretty good window here that faces one of the main streets downtown. And I watched through my binoculars, one of them just really struggling to open and close their car door.
You're such a creeper with your binoculars.
They just had like, they were getting out of the car and they put on their paws and helmet or like the head and everything. And then tried to close the car door with
Which again,
keys.
like maybe it's kind of like a kink. Like they want to struggle as if they're not human.
That's
you
what
know?
I think. I think
Yeah.
it's like I posted it as like I think it's their own form of jihad, where it's just like
Struggle.
you just like kind of struggle to be, you know,
Yeah, it's valid.
to attain a higher self.
Yeah. To obtain some kind of self.
Yep.
It was really surreal because when we walked down to the water to see the fireworks, there
Yeah.
were all these furries that were like raving, or they were like at a rave, I guess. They all had glow sticks. I just felt like I was in like a fever dream.
But also they were all chanting USA.
Yeah, that was
USA. They were
actually
kind of-
really fucked. There was
there's a
like a super like patriotic little group. Not all of them, but there was like a little patriotic group of furries. I was
There was a
just like,
contingent of MAGA furries there. There's someone. Some
should
of them
not
had,
be
like, the
allowed.
Make America Great. Well, I told you one of our first furry experiences.
yes,
You remember?
we talked about that on the podcast
In
before.
North Carolina,
Yeah.
it was like those two 3%er like don't
Yeah.
tread on me furries.
Yeah. But I just assume, I don't know why I assume this. I assume that most people who are on like the margins of anything would be like not conservative.
Bad assumption.
I guess so. It's weird. Yeah. The patriotism was awkward
Yeah.
when you're wearing a fur costume.
That's why, like subcultures aren't in and of themselves virtuous.
That's a good point. Yeah, it's really what you do with the subculture. I mean, I guess one thing that's virtuous about subcultures is that it gives people community, and that's nice.
Sure.
But
what if the community is like neo-Nazis?
Right.
That's not good.
So it still depends on what you do with it, but people do need community. It's lacking sorely in our age.
Yeah, absolutely. The MAGA furries were definitely interesting. Again, I just don't understand how they do this in like 90-degree heat. Someone's got to tell us. Who knows?
It's entirely no. I know at this point. I've seen them enough. It's intentional. The idea is that you can do this at the worst time of year. Like that's part of the joy of it, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because they could easily do this instead in October, but they do it every July.
We saw one today. I didn't get to get a picture, but it was a tiger with a really long tail.
Oh, she was cute. Yeah, she had the dress on over it.
Yeah, pretty cute. Mm-hmm. And then, so that's nice. But then I saw like a guy who was maybe like a shark or whatever and had like a little rubber tail, like a very erect rubber tail that just kind of like wagged around.
Did you not like that?
I didn't like that at all.
Okay, a little too phallic for you.
Maybe is that it? I don't know. I didn't like it. It looked weird.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. It was very dildo-y.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't see that.
Okay, that's the furry update. I don't think we have any more. I wonder if they ever step in like poop or anything, because there's a lot of pee and poo on the Pittsburgh sidewalks.
It's not that much.
It's quite a bit.
Okay.
This is like with you in New York, and you're like, there's no poop on the
you
New York
really
City,
look for poop. I don't know why.
Brooklyn, Manhattan sidewalks. There's nothing. They're all actually pretty clean.
They are pretty clean. They're cleaner than ever.
And then when we walk together, I'm like, there.
But I feel like there's less here than New York, obviously.
Sure. Yes. But it's still here.
Okay.
And especially in this area where we are. Lots of pee and poop.
Actually, there's a lot of pee in this area, I will say that.
A lot of pee.
Yeah. Struggle.
I've been thinking about creating like a Pittsburgh piss index as like a service to people.
I feel like it's kind of self-evident. Like I feel like you walk around and you can tell how much pee is in an area.
Hey, so is rain. People still need a rain forecast.
I know, but rain's like you're predicting for the future. Like I feel like
No. You're predicting for that day. You're just like, based on fact. And you could also predict for the future. I bet there's some sort of piss algorithm you could come up with.
Well, I think it's based on like bars and access to housing and
exactly
right. But those things change really slowly, so I feel like
no, they don't. They change day to day, just like the rain.
Okay? I mean, I could tell
the
you.
Humidity,
I think
it's also not how likely it is to be there, but
how much it affects
bad
you.
It's gonna.
So it's kind of interacting with the weather forecast. Then.
Exactly. Okay. If it's a humid day, then it's gonna be worse because it's like a hot, humid day, and it's just kind of like lingering around. It's worse than a cold day.
This is my guess. My guess is that like Friday through Sunday is the worst downtown, and that downtown is the worst neighborhood.
Well, there's your piss report for this episode, folks.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on.
Tomorrow's Monday. It's going to be looking up.
Yeah. Okay. Before we get to the Majlis thing,
please give us something else to bridge us. Because
I wanted to, in the news, a couple things have been going on. The Build Back, not Build Back Better, what's it called? Big Beautiful Bill
passed. Yeah.
Therefore making ICE like one of the largest law enforcement agencies, I think, in the world.
And also stripping just thousands of people across the country of healthcare.
Of Medicaid, yeah. Like 12 million people. It's a crazy amount. And most of those are, elderly people and then children. So, great time. And it seems like a lot of people who voted for it and even Trump himself aren't really sure what was in it. So, I'm sure we'll be finding out some really great things as time goes on.
Yeah, they really.
But hey, no more taxes on tips.
That's something.
I'm sure that's going to make up for the fact that people are now getting kicked off of their Medicaid.
Yeah, it'll all balance out.
Yeah. Okay, I had one item I wanted to bring up in the aftermath of Zohran Mamdani's win.
Okay.
A lot of people disgusted have something to say about the fact that he eats with his hands.
Yeah.
Like billions of people around the world. But
right. Also, by the way, so much American food is handheld, like hot dogs and hamburgers.
Yeah, actually, I mean, I think Americans in particular have no way to critique how other people eat. Just not even just based on the eating method, but the stuff that we eat here in this country. Like, maybe chill out. But Charlie Kirk, you know who Charlie Kirk is, right? He's just kind of that. You would recognize him if you saw his face, but he's like a conservative commentator, travels to campuses and then
Does kind of
tries to
gotcha
own
stuff.
undergrads. He's like a 30-something-year-old man who,
Nice.
owns undergrads at state schools. He tweeted, "I have so many thoughts on this that it literally keeps me up at night. Zohran Mamdani eating rice with his hands during an interview. I very sincerely doubt he has to scratch his anus any less than the rest of us, which makes that whole display unbelievably disgusting."
Okay, speak for yourself. Are you scratching your anus and not washing your hands?
It certainly sounds like Charlie Kirk is digging around in his butt
'cause
and
most
then
of us,
going around
like,
shaking hands with people.
In our 9-to-5 day lives, don't generally scratch our private parts.
Yeah. And I will say, years and years ago, when I switched from toilet paper to a bidet, my butt has not itched like once.
Didn't you grow up using bidets? I feel like most Muslim households do. We didn't, but
In Egypt, you have like a shatafa, but like here,
Yeah.
no, we had toilet paper.
you didn't use like Pakistanis. They have like water bottles in the bathroom or like little watering cans.
No.
Oh, your parents have a bidet now. I feel like
We were trying to get citizenship.
you're trying to assimilate.
Yeah, that's what assimilation means.
Well, that's why you gotta
They
do.
check your butt at the naturalization ceremony.
That's why you gotta
to
do
make
the
sure
water
that it's
bottle
not clean.
because it's really inconspicuous.
I see. Yeah, but there's that wouldn't get you past the butt check at the
That's fair.
But no, then now my parents have bidets in their home, and we have one. And yeah, I gotta say, my butt doesn't itch because it's actually clean, and it sounds like Charlie Kirk's is not.
Yeah.
And that he's, again,
It does make a huge difference, honestly. I only got into using it regularly probably this last couple months. It's taken a while of us being married. But it's helpful.
it's great.
I
And
don't
you
like
can-
ours. It's too intense, but
It's not too. What do you mean?
it's just the pressure hurts.
You can lower the pressure.
You've just shown me how. It's too complicated. I wish, honestly, what I like is when we were in Egypt, and I've seen this in other places too, just like a simple, like handheld, like thing.
But you can't control the pressure on those. Those are crazy because sometimes
but
you just
I just feel like it just
hit-
like gets the job done. It's not like scary. There aren't so many buttons, and
not
the pressure
scary.
is not that intense on those.
every once in a while you get one where you like the trigger, you hit it and it has like an insane amount of recoil. And then, I remember actually the first bidet that I got, I hooked it up. It was a mechanical one, not electric. So it's like you just hook it up to your water line. And it's like one of the ones that are you pull up on the lever, not a button or dial. And I pulled up on the lever and I accidentally just went all the way and it just like pressure washed my butthole. And it hurt so bad. Like I think I actually did do some damage that first time because I guess the water pressure where we were was like too strong. But
Wow, yeah, that's a real risk. You gotta be careful.
yeah.
At least the one we had in our hotel in Egypt was like a perfect pressure. It was totally chill.
But then I worked up to that pressure. It's just the first time.
Oh wow,
Oh my God, yeah.
you gotta hang in there.
Yeah, you really got to train.
You should actually give me a lesson on how to use ours. Maybe
I'll
I
do
can
better than that. I tried to get you to agree to this, but you just were so against it. You can
custom
program
thing.
a setting so you can find the one that you like with the pressure and all that stuff, and then
Okay.
you just hit
do that for me.
the number 1 or 2 button.
You can do that for me.
I'll program you into number 2.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah,
I'm against how much we paid for it, but it is nice. It's nice to have it.
yeah. People love it. I
They
think
do.
it's one of the main reasons they come to the
I
cafes.
don't think so.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about. There was some other people tweeted about it, but hold on. Let me see if I can, because I think Laura Loomer also mentioned something.
Yeah. Also, do we want to stay in this story? There's another Mamdani
Yeah.
story that maybe deserves a little bit more
Yeah, you introduced that while I find this other Laura Loomer tweet.
Sure. So the New York Times published this thing that when Mamdani applied to college to Columbia, he checked both that he was Asian and that he was African.
Mm-hmm.
And so this has been like a thing that everyone's talking about. But honestly, it just sounds like, I mean, one, I think identity is complicated. He was born in Uganda and was there for the first couple of years of his life and still actually has Ugandan citizenship. And it just seems like he was kind of like a smart ass kid who was trying to make a point that he like couldn't be contained in a box.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't get into Columbia and didn't plan on going because his dad was there. The weird thing about the story is that apparently there's this kind of like white supremacist to like leak the data, and the Times didn't include that part of it, which like it doesn't mean that it's not a story, and it's totally valid and interesting to think about like race. And I do feel like there are certain implications in terms of like taking that box. And I bet that even some people who like identify racially as Black but are immigrants from Africa might struggle with this, like in terms of like, are you claiming the legacy of the descendants of enslaved people, which is what a lot of people think when they think African American. So yeah, I don't know. It's complicated. I don't have a lot of opinions about it, but the way the reporting happened was really sketchy and interesting.
Two things. So you said that Columbia released this information to the New York Times.
So no, there was someone who got the information from Columbia, and that person is like a known white supremacist. And
how did they get the information from Columbia?
Let me check on that. I forget how. They've been putting together kind of, I think.
Because that's not public information, your college application. So
that's a good question.
I would have to, they would have to have someone inside Columbia's
I don't
office.
think that was the case. I think that they kind of like got the data somehow.
Well, I wouldn't have, to be quite honest with you, I wouldn't be super surprised if it was someone inside Columbia, because one of the things Mamdani wants to do is end Columbia's tax exemption.
Here's the case. They were hacked documents. Someone hacked the documents.
Hacked the documents, huh?
Like a white supremacist hacked them and leaked them. So actually they they hacked a bunch of documents. I don't think the person was looking for Mamdani, just to kind of make a point about race and admissions. And then in that someone found Mamdani's file.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. The second thing is, I feel like, especially given your specific focus, a lot of people come up against the question of what race they are or how they identify themselves.
After immigrating, yeah.
No.
Oh.
On forms.
Totally.
Specifically.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And, everyone applies to college, and there's this interesting... I mean, there are like Black people who also identify as some sort of, like you say, more, or, some people, like a lot of Black people who are like, oh, we're sons of Kemet or whatever. Like, we're Egyptians. Actually, we're the original Egyptians.
And then there also are like Black Arabs, obviously. And
there are Black Arabs, yes.
Yeah, Black Palestinians. Black.
But also, there is a point to be made, because a lot of these forms, when people apply, they want you to put white if you're Arab, right?
Which is going to change, actually, because the 2030 census is including a MENA category. But that's been the case for decades.
Yeah, but even right now, when I apply to a job and it asks what race you are, and then sometimes it just says white, and it doesn't have any further like explanation that white also contains Middle Eastern. But then sometimes it will have a parentheses, Middle Eastern, North African, blah blah blah. And even then, I'll still opt for other over white.
Would you ever click African? I mean, Egypt is in Africa.
I have.
Yeah.
Not for jobs, but when I applied to law schools.
Yeah.
I remember there being one school in particular that like the race selection category was like really insane. It was like
Black, white, Hispanic,
Black, Hispanic, some Asian groups, and then African.
Interesting. Oh, okay. So I guess like the African was kind of set apart from Black as a category.
I remember African being set apart. It wasn't African American. It was like...
That seems more... I get that then. Yeah.
And so I was like, okay. I mean, I don't think this is what they intend, but at the same time, like this just kind of, again, proving the point that the way that we do racial categorization here is kind of stupid. So,
or also
and
just that
confusing.
like, yeah, it's less set in stone. Like it is a social construction. It's a very powerful one, but right, it's not like necessarily clear cut all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I haven't. Just a couple of tweets, I guess, on Zohran eating, by the way.
Okay.
Civilized people in America don't eat like this, wrote Republican Representative Brandon Gills of Texas. So these are like, media figures and also political elected officials. Look how this pig, Zohran, eats with his hands, posted MAGA podcaster Mike Crispy of New Jersey. Have some respect for our system? So now when you eat, that's a political act. And depending on how you eat, you may or may not be disrespecting this country, which may or may not mean that you'll be denaturalized or ICE will come for you. Maybe at some point that'll be like a statutory offense.
Again, this is such racialized language. It's so interesting. I feel like a lot of kind of racist rhetoric involves like the divide between who we consider to be human and who we consider to be an animal. And so kind of using like animalistic language to describe someone. But again, it's super ironic because like I've even felt this. I don't know if you've ever felt this way, but I feel like Europeans really use cutlery more than we do. Mm-hmm. I actually eat a lot with my hands. I just feel like Americans eat more with their hands than a lot of other countries. So it's just like weird. I don't know.
Pizza.
Like I've felt that pressure abroad to be like, oh, like let me really try and use my fork when I would normally use my hands.
There are people in Europe who, you eat pizza with like a fork and knife.
Exactly.
And the people here just fold it in half and shove it down their mouths.
I mean, that's what I prefer for sure. But yeah.
Okay, hold on. Wait, there's more to that tweet. Look how this pig Zohran eats with his hands. Have some respect for our system. Using a fork, all caps, and acknowledging the greatness of capitalism. Is that insane?
I mean, using a fork, probably pre-capitalism.
Well, also the fork is like, a European,
it's pretty simple invention.
Invention is what I mean. Is my guess. So it really sounds like this guy is just still pretty colonized.
The greatest invention of capitalism is definitely central air. It's ironic because it's also killing us and killing the planet, but it's so great.
I think the Arabs invented central air.
What? You think the Arabs invented everything?
Who? Let's see. Who invented?
What do you mean? Like aircon, or you mean like some kind of other? If it's not an air conditioner, that's not what I'm talking about.
Okay. Well, some white guy seems to be the guy everyone's inventing, but I feel like people in the desert probably had some system of cooling through.
You're like
I'll come back. You're
to like
this.
that, like My Big Fat Greek Wedding, where the guy is like, everything is from Greece.
Exactly. Okay. All right. That's it for the Zohran Mamdani eating with his hands discourse.
Good discourse.
What else we got? Is that it? Or are we moving on to Ashura?
I think moving on to Muharram, yeah.
Okay. And then I have an article.
Nice. We'll end with that.
Huh?
So nice. We'll end with that.
Yeah, it's a really nice note to end.
Okay, good. I look forward to it. So how was your first Majlis? And then we'll talk a little bit about it, but what was your impression? So we went to the Shia Mosque. It's currently Muharram, which I'll explain a little bit what that is in a bit.
They immediately clocked me as not Shia.
Yeah. Well, also, it's like everyone's getting together every night, and we clearly were new there. We got there really early by accident,
Sure. But I think the guy saw me praying, and he was like, "Oh, you're, how do you feel about Ahlul Bayt?" And I was just like,
was that the first thing he said?
Love for them. He was just like trying to tiptoe around. He's like, "Are you Sunni? Are you Shia? You think about Ahlul Bayt and all this stuff?" And I was just like, I was raised Sunni. My wife is Shia. I was trying to just be like, I didn't know what to say because I didn't want to offend. I wanted to just be like, it's kind of a meaningless distinction to me. Like, it doesn't really figure in our lives other than
that's really valid.
We pray a little bit differently from each other.
Not really.
We do.
I don't think so.
Yeah, we do.
But I couldn't follow the Shia prayer. I was super confused. I'm probably just a hybrid mess, but
maybe it's because you've probably been in Sunni mosques most of your life, right?
I'll get into the story in a bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah. I guess the difference between how you and I pray there's less difference than between how
Exactly.
This prayer was and how I'm used
Yeah.
to. And I'm not saying this in like a pejorative.
I think
or
that
bad way at all,
probably
but-
part of our difference is whatever YouTube thing that taught me how to pray might be different than what are Egyptians like Maliki or yeah.
You tell me, Islamic scholar.
Yeah. The truth is that a lot of us learn in hybrid ways nowadays.
Yeah.
Like we go to mosques where people have come from different places around the world. But yeah, did you like it? Like we were there forever.
So I thought it was a cute little space. I thought it was a lot more, it felt a lot more porous than a lot of the Sunni mosques we've been to, just in terms of like the separation.
That's actually very common in Shia mosques, which is nice for the barrier to be like much less of a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there still was a barrier, but a lot of women were regularly ducking their heads out to like check on their husbands or talk to them.
Yeah. I thought it was very moving. I think the stories, the sheikh who was speaking, talked about the murder of Ali, Imam Ali, and then...
Or no, he was talking mostly about Imam Hussein, but then also about Hussein's son, Ali. Yeah.
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 But then, I don't know. It was just like, at first I was just like, oh, this is really different. Like when he first started kind of narrating the story, I thought people on your side were laughing.
Really?
I thought because it was so porous and the kids were running around and going, I thought maybe someone was laughing at the kids.
Oh,
like
that's so funny.
They
were
something.
crying, right?
And then I realized that there were men on my side, that started to cry also.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh, this is okay. Like they're moved by this. I didn't grow up with these stories. And I was just like, oh, now I know something about them even before we went, but it wasn't something that I was taught to connect to as a kid, but even though now I have like a deep appreciation for the universality of the stories about, fighting for justice and
that Iraqi uncle who was trying to convert you last night would be so proud of you right now.
Well, I was telling him,
Yeah.
I told him this yesterday, but he was really trying to make the hard sell. He's like, so you're converting to Shias. And I was just like, I don't know. But, anyway, so I think I was predisposed to appreciating it, but I would say probably when they did the procession that I guess was supposed to symbolize like a funeral or something for the Ahl al-Bayt.
Yeah.
I was very touched. Like I started to kind of feel like a little
that's
teary.
so sweet.
Yeah.
Aw, that's so nice. I hadn't heard that reflection before from you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I saved it for the podcast.
That's good.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I feel like I think I've talked about this a little bit before on the podcast, but I didn't have like a very consistent religious upbringing at all. It was kind of like the Christian version of like we celebrate Christmas, like it was just kind of like holidays and stuff. So like my dad outsourced our religious teaching. He hired some Iranian woman. So I guess at some point I did learn the Shia prayers, but I really didn't learn them very well. And then my only real relationship to Muharram or to like these Shia morning songs, which I'll explain what they are in a little bit.
Actually, maybe we should explain.
Should I explain first and then talk about my personal relationship?
In the Islamic calendar, this is the month of Muharram.
All right, so let me give you
the first 10 days.
Yeah.
And the 10th day is called Ashura, which is 10 in Arabic.
Yeah.
But
so I can give an overview first if that's helpful before I talk about my personal relationship. Yeah. So basically the main sect of Muslims are Sunnis. And then there's a minority sect called Shias. And about 10 to 15% of the world is Shia.
Yeah.
But there are some nation states like Iran or Iraq where the majority happen to be Shia. So, not in all places and times are Shias a minority, but they are a global minority. And at the time of the Prophet Muhammad's death, there was debate in the Muslim community about who should kind of lead the community forward. And so, like, theologically, a lot of Shias will kind of like say like, oh, from the beginning, there were people that kind of thought it should be Ali. And there were, but there wasn't like, if we're talking more with our religious studies hats on, there wasn't really necessarily like a distinct doctrine of Shiism until a little bit later. And that's really common, right? That's not to say Shiism isn't valid. Like, I mean, even if you want to get really into the religious studies weeds, like the beginning of Christianity, the beginning of Judaism, the beginning of Islam. A lot of people are like, oh, we're renewing monotheism, but there aren't necessarily people who are distinctly calling themselves Muslims until like, you know, as the prophet's dying. So yeah, from a Shia perspective, Shiism is like the path to Islam. It's not like some aberration that happened later, obviously. And then during the Umayyad Caliphate, so, you know, a couple hundred years after the prophet's death, or really only like a century and a half, some of the descendants of the prophet's family were killed in this really awful way. And that's something that like all Muslims mourn. It's not like anyone looks at that incident and is like, oh, that was great. It's like, it was a tragedy, but Shias have a kind of unique relationship to commemorating that loss, which is kind of a cornerstone. So really there aren't like a ton of differences between Sunnis and Shias. Like it's the same Quran, you know, Shias can combine their prayers and pray like 3 times a day instead of 5. The main difference is really this kind of way that Karbala is commemorated. The concept of the imamate is definitely different. It's a little bit of a lazy analogy, but I think it's a decent one. Kind of the idea of like Catholicism and papal authority, I think is a decent analogy for the idea of the imamate. So like the imams are not prophets, but they were kind of like stewards of God's kind of will for humanity, and kind of like the best representations of the prophet's will. There are 12 of us. There are 12 of, not of us, of them. The last one, the Mahdi, is currently in occultation, will like come back at the end of time. But there were these 12 people.
You just give yourself away.
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
There were these 12
Mahdi
people.
wasn't hiding in Pittsburgh.
There were these 12 people that while they existed. So like, for example, something that's really different in terms of like hadith in the Sunni traditions are like sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, sayings and actions, things that he like approved of or didn't approve of. So a lot of like little details that are not in the Quran, like for example, how to pray properly actually come from hadith. But whereas Quran is like the direct voice of God, hadith can be a little bit more fallible because they are kind of written down through a chain of transmission like telephone. Like someone heard someone say, going all the way back to like the prophet did XYZ. So, I mean, there are hadith Qudsi, which are technically from God, but for the most part, when you think of Sunni hadith, you think of the prophet.
But there's just real quick, there's a very rigorous way of tracing hadith to know whether or not they are, and testing them to know whether or not they are like historically accurate. And then like there are certain chains of transmission of hadith that are recognized by scholars and others that are just not as well recognized, right?
Yeah, excellent.
It's not just like like this guy said and this guy said.
Right.
Like
No, you're totally right. During the Abbasid Empire, that kind of like process of standardization happened. So if you're like a layperson today, you're not going through that chain. You just kind of pick up like Bukhari, or you pick up like a compilation which has been well vetted, in which only it'll actually say next to the hadith how strong it is in terms of like the 2 ways to measure strength are, one, that there is like a clear transmission. So like these 2 people lived in the same time period. And then like also the trustworthiness of the narrator. I guess there's 3 ways. The third way is like if more than one person heard something, it's more strong as opposed to like a single chain of transmission. So if the prophet said something in front of like a group of people and then like those oral transmissions it's really cool actually from like a historical perspective, because I think you can also see kind of the transition from a mostly oral society to mostly literate one. Like what does it mean to kind of codify things in that way? But all that to say that another small difference between Sunnis and Shias is that Shias have hadith from their imams. So that's like a whole different corpus that Sunnis don't have. And then Shias also, there are companions of the Prophet who are not considered to be reputable by Shias. And so like, you know, Shias don't take any hadith from Aisha, for example. So yeah, that creates slightly different corpuses, I guess. But the Quran is the same, and like most of the stuff is the same. And there's a special reverence for the Prophet's family, for the Prophet and for his Ali, who's both his cousin and his son-in-law, and his daughter Fatima, who is married to Ali, and then their 2 children, Hassan and Hussein. Hussein being the person who was killed during Karbala, during this event that is commemorated in this month.
Yeah.
So yeah, are those like all the basic details, I feel like?
Yeah.
Yeah. There also, we don't have to get into this, but there actually are multiple different Shia branches, but my family is from like the majority Shia branch, which is the Twelvers, or Jafris are called. But if you've heard of like Ismailis and the Aga Khan, their imam is still alive. That's like a whole different thing. There's also Zaydis, which are pretty much just in Yemen. So there's a couple different groups.
Yeah.
The Alawites in Syria, I think, are technically Shia. They're really tiny though. Yeah. Yeah. So I was going to say my relationship to this was basically like funerals is when I would hear these like nohas or mourning songs. And so nohas are songs that commemorate the martyrdom of Imam Hussein and the Battle of Karbala and the kind of like period where this massacre happened. And the thing that's kind of hard about them when you're a kid is that people who grew up, like you're saying, people who grew up hearing them are so in tune with the story that they kind of are all able to cry, especially some older people, like at the right times. And so especially like in the context that I was in, the nohas were all in Urdu. I don't speak Urdu, unfortunately. My dad's Pakistani, but I didn't learn Urdu. And so it's really hard to connect to the story because you just don't know what's happening. And it can be kind of a little eerie, honestly, especially if you're younger. Even like, I think I was in high school when my cousins died and we had like a lot of commemorations, unfortunately, for their death. And it felt kind of freaky to be in a room filled with like people and just like to have women like shrieking with grief. And like pulling their hair. And so I kind of had like a sort of more negative perception of it. I think just because I didn't know much about it. And then when I was in college and I became more interested in Islam sort of for myself and more practicing, everyone I knew was Sunni for the most part. And my MSA was actually pretty anti-Shia. And I will say, actually, something I forgot to mention, I always kind of felt upset when people were anti-Shia, even if I myself was not that connected to Shiism,
Sure.
Almost on kind of like an identity basis, because one of my dad's cousins was kidnapped and tortured and murdered in Pakistan for being Shia, and it was like a really huge thing in our family. It scared a lot of us for obvious reasons. A lot of people immigrated after that, and so I guess like on an identity basis, I felt strongly about like anti-Shia discrimination, just knowing that that was a problem for our family in Pakistan. And even when we visited, I remember like, I wasn't this dumb, but fair enough. My dad was just like paranoid. He was like, don't say the word Shia. Don't mention it. Don't mention it around like other people who aren't our family. We were staying with a cousin of my dad's who is Shia and his wife is Sunni, which used to be very common. And at one point I was like, oh, and like everyone was like, shut the fuck up. like it was very like, don't talk about it. If people who are not family are around, just like because of this paranoia, because of this uncle who was kidnapped. And I will say he was such a lovely man. I mean, you feel sorry for anyone, obviously, but I met him when I was 5 and he's one of the few people that I remember because he worked the family farm. And I grew up in New York City and I'd never been to a farm before. And he just was like, he showed me like everything just seemed so magical, like the potatoes and how they came out of the ground. It just like spoiled the shit out of me. Such a lovely guy, such a loss. And no one really wanted to work the farm, but he was like really good at it and like really loved working with the land and stuff. So anyway, I guess I felt like strongly about anti-Shia bias, but I didn't know much about Shiism myself. And then fast forward a couple of years, I was in graduate school. I was doing my master's at Harvard Divinity School. And I took a class on Shiism and I got super into nohas, into Shia mourning songs. I think I just really realized for the first time that once you listen to a couple and once you know the story well enough, there's something so cool about being able to listen to a story in any language and being able to pick up on like the main plot points just based on like the cadence of the singer's voice and based on like one or two key names. And in a time where I wasn't really that practicing, formally speaking, like I wasn't praying very often, and I had a lot of Muslim friends for the first time, which was really special, but I was kind of struggling with some other stuff. Just, as you go through life and you're figuring things out, I really listened to them a lot. And like, it really meant a lot to me.
Yeah.
And I think
that's
like,
so sad because when we were leaving yesterday, it was late and we had, been doing this for several hours, and then you're like, let me play you my favorite one, and then you were playing it and it was fine, but then it was just like it was going on for a really long time.
No, you were such a good sport. I think that's fair. You already had a lot of Shia stuff. That's actually my favorite one though. It's so beautiful. It's this Persian reciter, and I don't know. I feel like I just have like a different appreciation now for the story. So like there are different archetypes, and I think something that's really beautiful about it is that there weren't archetypes, there were real people, but they symbolize things that are kind of like always with us, right?
Yep.
So Yazid, who is the second Umayyad caliph who ordered for Hussein to be murdered, he's the embodiment of evil. And Hussein is the embodiment of good in the face of overwhelming evil. And what's so beautiful about his sacrifice is like he was kind of like destined to like be killed in this horrific way. And I think the way that she has really drawn this story is to be like, even if all the odds are stacked against you, like you have to stand up for injustice. And this is going to sound so corny, and it is, but like after Trump was elected, I really liked listening to like I think it's permission to kind of fuse your personal pain and fear with something that feels grander. And I think that like a lot of like therapy speak and stuff goes against that. Like at least I've had that experience in therapy, to be like, oh, like you're kind of conflating your personal fears and your personal anxiety with like catastrophizing the world. And I get that perspective, but I think there's also something really powerful about like, I'm going to channel my personal fears for myself, which like are not that deep in the scheme of things. You know what I mean? Even if they are like political or identity based. And there's this like more beautiful narrative that like is supposed to be emboldening and empowering that I can connect it to. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the other main kind of people in the story is Abbas, who is Hussein's half brother and close friend, and he's kind of the embodiment of friendship and sacrifice. Ali Asghar, who's Hussein's 6-month-old son. And all of these names, by the way, like if you ever meet, like we know, I have tons of family members with these names. They're very common for Shias. Either Ali or Ali Asghar. He's the embodiment of innocence and humanity's capacity for absolute evil. And then Zainab, who's Hussein's sister, she's the only one who survives the carnage and lives to tell the tale. And she's kind of the embodiment of resilience and strength, the importance of like speaking truth to power and like storytelling even after everyone's gone, right? Mm-hmm. Like that you have to like keep on going. You can't just give up, even if you would want to, and all of your family members have been slaughtered. So I get why people find it a little bit strange, because it is like, it does promote martyrdom, you know, but I think it's not martyrdom for martyrdom's sake. I think it's martyrdom for the sake of like higher ideals. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, something I try and do. I didn't cry, but I definitely felt moved at parts. Like, I think I think also having kind of rituals for grief can be helpful, because you're supposed to compartmentalize, but in a way that hopefully leads you to action. Like it's a time, you know, we see so much carnage like throughout our everyday lives, but like, I never really I try and push those things away, honestly, because it's hard to keep on going. And it feels like such a disconnect to like live your regular life when you see such awful things. You know what I mean? I'm thinking like in this moment, obviously, specifically about Palestine, but you could be thinking about other things. And so there is something kind of helpful, you know, hopefully not just that for that sake, but to like motivate you to have a time. Like I imagine that a lot of people in that room, especially when they think about the kid that was killed, about Ali Asghar, they think about the images they've seen recently, right? Like there's a kind of thing that you connect in your brain. And I think I have more of an appreciation now, especially at my cousin's funerals. I mean, one of my cousins was named Qasim, which is also the name of one of the Prophet Muhammad's sons who died at a very young age. And so I think like, I get now that people were crying at parts where the children were dying. And that was like what really was a way for them to process their grief. Anyway, sorry, I've been talking for a while, but yeah, I think it is interesting to think about the kind of place of narrative in processing both like communal grief and also individual grief. And I also think about like how the women who cry like the most intensely, and it's like a little theatrical, I'm not gonna lie, are like older women who have probably seen a lot of shit at this point. Like they probably have a lot of stuff, you know, you're like in your 80s that you could plug in your head. They've probably seen some real loss. And so they're like fulfilling kind of a communal function by doing that. Some of those women are scary though, man, because when the kids are laughing and stuff, it's almost kind of funny. That also breaks up the like somberness of it. Yeah. Because the children, like, I don't know what they think is happening, and I'm sure they grow up and understand, obviously, but like they're kind of like playing and stuff. And it's sort of like a beautiful reminder of like life goes on.
Yeah.
But they also grow up with these like terrifying aunties, like weeping, like just staring them down. Yeah. It's like really kind of very like stark and austere. Yeah. It was like, there's this really cute little 2-year-old Afghan girl who was like smiling, and this aunt was just like mean grilling her. I was like, she doesn't know what's happening. Chill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The kids were cute. It was fun to watch them run around too.
Yeah. Something really weird that Sunni Muslims do, and I had to look this up to remind myself what it was. And this is kind of, I think, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but this is like the last couple generations. I don't know if this has always been a practice, and that doesn't to make it less valid. Like practices are dynamic and always shifting. But on Ashura, which is like the 10th day when like Imam Hussein was martyred, they fast to commemorate when Moses or Prophet Musa parted the Red Sea, which I feel like is just like so random. Like I feel like they just picked this to have like their own thing to do on this day. Yeah, I don't know. It just seems really odd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds like it could be a thing. We'd have to see where that originated.
Yeah, and when it became more common.
Like I wonder if it's like a Saudi invention.
It's possible. By the way, in a lot of communities that have mixed Sunni Shia groups, historically there have been a lot of really cute things where like, or not even Shia, like not even Sunni rather, like just like mixed religious groups in general, where like different communities play a role in kind of like assisting in like Muharram processions, even if they're not directly involved. Like I know that there are like communities in India. I don't know how this is now with like all the sectarian tension and also like sectarian, also all the Hindu Muslim tension on top of the intra-Muslim tension, but where like Sunnis would like cook for their neighbors and stuff like that, like during this time, which I think is really sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. And you don't want to go back tonight?
No, I'm good. I was really glad that we went, but it was long as hell. And okay, also I feel like I'm so confused with like prayer and stuff. Just like I really learned how to pray from YouTube. Like that's how I learned how to pray properly. I feel comfortable praying. I should do more of it. But I was just confused because like I just did not know what was happening, and I find it really stressful to be in an environment where everyone is synced up and you don't know what's going on. But just like I was confused with what was happening.
Yeah.
When there was like actual standard prayer time.
Yeah.
People were not synced. They were all going at like different rates. I was very confused.
It felt a little bit more free flowing, but
yeah, that's a good way to put it.
I think on our side it was confusing at first because I wasn't really sure how it was starting, but I think once it started, it was there. And then there were some differences that caught me off guard, but I just kind of prayed the way that I normally do, but just kind of went along with them. Yeah,
that's smart. No, we had people going at like different rates, which was confusing me. I don't know what was happening, but
yeah,
it's all right.
Cool.
So you're not converting?
Again, I think if people were to ask me like, oh, why are you Sunni? I'd be like, bro, I don't. That's the thing. I was telling this guy, I was like, hey, I am not. It's not like I chose being Sunni for any sort of intellectual reason. It's just the way that I was raised, and because, you know, Sunnism is the hegemonic sort of way of being. You never like are intellectually engaging with it in that way, where you're like, oh, this like really speaks to me in the same way that you would if you were part of a minority group, right? I think when you're part of the minority group, you're learning a little bit more about the differences, and, you know, you're a bit more aware of, you know, we're persecuted for believing this and that, and which is something that like Sunnis don't really have to worry about in most places in the world. So, and now we're at the point where, yeah, to us, it's kind of, even the sheikh yesterday said this, right? He is when he was talking, he said it doesn't really matter. He's just like, we're all, you know, worshippers of one and the same Islam. Not really much of a difference between Sunni and Shia, right? Like if as long as the Sunni, you know, has love for Ahl al-Bayt, it's not like Shias have any sort of disdain for followers of the Sunnah, you know? Like, you think you think there is?
I don't think it's like has to be a huge deal, but yeah, I mean, like there are, I guess, just like there's different understandings of like who is a genuine follower of the Prophet a little bit. Like, I mean, like I guess the main thing I'm thinking about is Aisha, but yeah, no, I agree. I feel like on the whole, there aren't major differences. I feel like at this point in my life, I really don't identify as Sunni or Shia. Like, I don't see a huge thing.
Yeah.
I guess one thing I'll say is like, I personally don't feel that connected to the conception of the imamate, and that's why I would hesitate to identify myself as Shia. And like, not that I think it's like theologically an issue or anything. I just don't personally find a lot of resonance with it.
Yeah.
And I guess just frankly, at the point in which like I actually became more practicing and interested in Islam, I just was exposed to more Sunni sources, and that's kind of what filtered into my brain. But I do feel like a special reverence and connection to the story of Karbala, and I think it's not uncommon for quite a few Sunnis to feel that way as well. So yeah, I don't think they're totally mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
And I guess a lot of things that I like about Shi'ism, I think that you and I find connection to in Sufism, like some of the kind of more mystical elements, and I mean even like a lot of Sufi lineages, not that we're part of a Sufi tariqah because we're not, but they actually will list in their lineage like Ali, like there tends to be like some similar crossover in followers and in kind of not in followers, that's not the right term, in like leaders, I guess, or people who are points of reverence or connection to the prophet through which you connect to God. And even like the practice of like dhikr, like I think repetitive practices, dhikr is like kind of invoking God's name in different ways repetitively. There's a lot of crossover in my mind between that and like noha is just like the idea of like rhythmically in unison connecting.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I don't know. I feel like there are ways to access those things and you don't really have to pick a label. It's not that serious if you don't want to. I mean, nothing wrong with labeling yourself if you find community in that. That's also helpful, but you don't have to like pick a team necessarily. Something I'm really interested in, I feel like the more and more I start to kind of think in my head that we probably are in Pittsburgh for the long term, you know, for the foreseeable future is, I mean, yeah, we're a ways away from this, but I feel like it's a cool goal to like try and like connect or bridge some of these communities just because there is so much diversity in every way possible in a pretty small group of Muslims within Pittsburgh, which is really interesting. So I think it'd be cool to kind of see people come together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like both across like racial lines, across theological lines.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's one thing I also find like not bad, but one thing I like about Sunni mosques, they tend to be a lot more diverse. Shia mosques, usually you're just going to have like Pakistanis, Indians, Iranians, Afghans, but it's not like people don't convert into Shias.
Some Iraqis?
There's a few Iraqis, yeah. It was mostly Desi. It was mostly Pakistani specifically.
Mostly, yeah. They did a lot of the nohas in
Urdu, right? Yeah. So it's kind of assuming most people can follow.
Right.
But again, even I don't know Urdu, you could still follow with some of the main names and stuff.
Right.
I cannot tell you like in what detail. Like I don't know all the names. My dad told me some name the other day, and he was like, "Oh," because even though he's really not a religious guy, he grew up listening to the stuff. So like all the people are in his head. I only know like the main 6 people. You know.
Yeah.
Was I gonna say? Yeah, no, but like think about like ICP, like it really feels like the entire world is there. It's so cool. And a lot of converts are there. I think that because the Nohas are like
next to a university.
It is, but a lot of Sunni mosques are like that in my experience.
Not a lot, no. I mean, I've been to a few that are, you know, not that close to a university, and they tend to have, they're more homogenous.
Really? Because I feel like they usually at least have like Arabs, South Asians, Africans, like West Africans, East Africans. Like
I've been to a few that are just Desi, and then the one in Greensboro we went to is like overwhelmingly just
Desi?
Sudanese.
Yeah, no, you're right. There can still be that pooling, but I guess like I think because the Nohas tend to be in either Persian or Urdu or Arabic, I think that it's less convert friendly.
Yeah.
And I guess also maybe when I don't know. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. What else?
That's all I had.
Nice. Okay. I have an article that I haven't really read all of, but I think it's worth discussing. This is the Financial Times reporting on Boston Consulting Group's role in the, the GHF, Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, that was set up by the Trump administration to what we know now is pretty much just caging them in food lines and then opening fire, like just using American mercenaries to shoot live munitions at them. There have been a couple videos circulating recently that show these mercenaries, and there have been reports that some of them don't really have much experience, and yeah, they're just getting trigger happy and they're shooting, and there are videos of them celebrating hitting a target. They're like, "Oh, you got one. I think I got one," sort of thing, which is absolutely disgusting. But
I've heard of the Boston Consulting Group. That is weird. Like I wouldn't expect them to be in any way involved in this.
Yeah, so it came out, and then it seemed like they tried to distance themselves from it, saying that well, they started to do some pro bono work, but then they stopped. And then these two people within Boston Consulting Group went off and took on this work anyway, against the wishes of the company, which seems strange to me. But anyway, so this is Financial Times. It's a pretty long piece, but I think it's worth discussing. So I'm going to read a bit and then we'll skip around. Okay. So I'm going to start reading. We can skip around, discuss as needed. Boston Consulting Group modeled the costs of relocating Palestinians from Gaza and entered into a multi-million-dollar contract to help launch an aid scheme for the shattered enclave.
Wait, pause. So that means that the government hired them?
Yes.
Oh, God.
The consulting firm helped establish the Israel and U.S.-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation and supported a related security company, but then disavowed the project, which has been marred by the deaths of hundreds of Palestinians, and fired two partners last month. BCG's role was more extensive than it has publicly described. According to people familiar with the project, stretching over 7 months, covering more than $4 million of contracted work and involving internal discussions at senior levels of the firm. More than a dozen BCG staff worked directly on the evolving project, codenamed Aurora, between October and late May. Senior figures at BCG discussed the initiative, including the firm's chief risk officer and the head of its social impact practice. The BCG team also built a financial model for the post-war reconstruction of Gaza, which included cost estimates for relocating hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from the Strip and the economic impact of such a mass displacement. One scenario estimated more than 500,000 Gazans would leave the enclave with relocation packages worth $9,000 per person, or around $5 billion in total. So let's pause there. Their work is essentially, what is the cost-benefit analysis of ethnically cleansing Gaza versus rebuilding with people there and enabling them to stay in their homes?
Yeah.
And then pair that with the actions of, Israel's continuing to do airstrikes, bombing daily. If anything, it's just gotten worse. And people talk about it less because other things are happening, or there's just like news fatigue, or it's just become normalized. But they have really mechanized their genocide.
Yeah, it's also just such a cartoonish, I mean, it almost sounds like an Onion article, like extension of like capitalist logic to try and like build out a net benefit sort of framework for this.
Could you imagine being the guy who has built a spreadsheet, right? You have an Excel spreadsheet that these models are built on, is doing a calculation of, we think if we offer $9,000, this percentage of people who are currently victims of ethnic cleansing and genocide may choose to leave. And you're creating like a cost benefits sheet for genocide.
What it also reminds me of is it's very like neo-colonial. I mean, these were the kinds of conversations that colonists had in terms of like the very haphazard decisions they made with people's lives, just thinking about their own profit margins.
Yeah. Reading a little bit more. The UN has described GHF as a fig leaf for Israeli war aims, and humanitarian groups refuse to cooperate with it. Since GHF's chaotic launch in May, Israeli forces have killed more than 400 Palestinians trying to reach distant distribution sites, according to health officials in Gaza. 9 people familiar with BCG's work described to the Financial Times how one of the world's most prestigious consulting firms became ever more deeply enmeshed in a scheme championed by the White House but condemned internationally. BCG has previously said little about the scale of its involvement. It has described the work as having begun as pro bono in October 2024 to help establish an aid organization intended to operate alongside other relief efforts. BCG claimed subsequent work was unauthorized and has sought to blame misjudgments by 2 senior partners from its Washington-based U.S. defense practice. I don't know if we'll find out later in this piece if we find out that that claim from BCG is bullshit, but I just find it hard to believe that two people who are senior partners in BCG are just moonlighting as consultants for ethnic cleansing.
Yeah.
Without knowledge of the organization itself, because if, according to BCG, this project doesn't exist, then what are these guys doing with their working hours, right? Like, you'd be working 24/7 nonstop 365 if you're like, I'm doing my BCG work, which is definitely not ethnic cleansing, and then I'm doing my ethnic cleansing work in the evenings.
Right.
You know, it's just a little bit far-fetched and feels a little bit too clean that they're just saying, oh yeah, just these two guys are the only ones who are responsible for setting up these models for ethnic cleansing. The BCG work was led by the U.S. Defense Practice and staffed mainly from the Washington office, but the initial phase of work helping establish the GHF and SRS was billed to BCG's social impact practice under the leadership of Rich Hutchinson.
Wait, pause. It's also so funny because when I hear social impact, I think like supposed to be positive, right? Like how companies allegedly like help the world. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, no, this is, you know, at this point, the comparison, it feels a little bit rote, but yeah, it's like, oh, we're doing pro bono work advising, you know, the Nazi party or, you know, Auschwitz or whatever. Like it's crazy, and calling that social impact. Under the leadership of Rich Hutchinson, who allocated more than $1 million in several tranches to cover the consultants' pro bono hours, what BCG called guardrails were agreed, which declared that the project should not use consultants from the Middle East or Israel to avoid accusations of bias, according to people familiar with the decisions. In a pivotal decision for BCG that shows how its involvement deepened, by January, internal discussions shifted to a new phase of work where the firm would be paid to help establish GHF's operations on the ground, working out of Tel Aviv. So
like, no bias there.
Yeah. So they're like, yeah, we definitely should not include any Arabs in this, but we should base it out of Tel Aviv. Is, yeah, I mean, no more needs to be said there. Hutchinson indicated his openness to budgeting funds to match any payments from BCG from the GHF, a common practice that allows consultants, in effect, to charge half prices to charities. So, of course, they're, you know, still getting paid full price. It's just they're laundering the money through somewhere else.
It's depressing and interesting, I guess, to think about, like, inshallah, when the end of this genocide happens, like, how will companies be held into account? Like, these sort of entities that are almost kind of acting, I mean, they're being contracted by the government, but they're almost like acting like their own sort of governmental actors, if that makes sense, which is really weird in the region.
Yeah. Do you want to hear their statement that they gave, which has just the most jargony bullshit consultant speak ever?
Sure.
This is how the piece ends from BCG's legal team. We are acting with urgency and seriousness to learn from this and to ensure it does not happen again. Our ambition is and has always been to contribute to effective, multilateral, and sustainable humanitarian responses. We are committed to living our values with accountability for our failures and humility in how we move forward.
Wow. Literally, I feel like that was probably written by ChatGPT. There's nothing about the particular circumstances of this incident in that statement at all.
There's also, again, accountability apparently means denying and shifting all of the blame onto these two guys who were just like overly zealous and really committed to Israel's ethnic cleansing of Gaza. But I think the main point here is that they've reduced the lives of Palestinians and therefore everyone's life, right? Like they've just reduced the value of a human life down to, you know, something that can just be quantified in a spreadsheet. And if the numbers make sense, then they'll try to do it. And if the numbers don't make sense, then Israel's just going to keep going with its ethnic cleansing because they're like, Well, it costs too much money. And I'm sure there's probably a spreadsheet out there that says like, to kill all the Palestinians, we need to drop this many bombs that cost this much money. And then if I'm sure showed that to Netanyahu versus, a cost benefit analysis of like relocating them, maybe that would sway him. And that's just the dark present that we're in.
Yeah. It's I'm glad that this report came out. Like, I'm glad that there is a documented trail of this happening. Like,
Yeah.
I wonder how many other companies have really specific federal contracts that are being used to sort of scaffold this genocide.
Yeah, there was a report that just came out. I forget who put it out, but it was pretty comprehensive, and it listed the top contributing companies, and it was like
I saw that. Yeah.
Microsoft, Google, Oracle, maybe. I don't remember all of them, but it's there.
Yeah. No, that's helpful. I'm glad people are doing that work.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it, everyone. Hope that you have a day filled with remembrance and good action.
Check in on your furry friends. They'll be experiencing post-con depression, which is a thing.
We're going to be experiencing post-con secondhand depression just because downtown's been so lively.
I know.
Yeah.
It is kind of sad. Anyway, all right. Bye.
Bye.